I'm going to talk about the time I did 10 grams of mushroom. So to give you some context, there is quite a range, and some mushrooms are more potent than others. So the weight of the mushroom doesn't necessarily depict the type of experience you're going to have. However, as a general rule, a lot of people consider 5 grams of mushrooms as a heroic dose. Welcome back. My name is Amber, and I am a psychedelic integrator. I support people with using psilocybin mushrooms as a medicine, and I do integration work as well as my own personal exploration into the world of psychedelics. So on this channel, I share my experiences and the information that I've gathered doing this work. Also, I am not a medical professional, and this is not medical advice. So if you need some medical advice, please consult your doctor. So prior to me discovering and doing 10 grams, before that, I had already been working with psilocybin quite a bit, working with integrating other people and helping with their process through microdosing as well as macrodosing. So generally, a lot of times people that start with mushrooms might be between 2 or 3 grams, in that range, and then going up to 5 grams. I had already personally experienced with various types of mushrooms as well as different weights. And I had done 5 grams of mushrooms, and that was the highest I had ever done at this time. Then I went to Mexico. And in Mexico, I met some amazing people that, if I can get their link, I'll put it in the description. They help and support people with utilizing psychedelics and different types of methods of healing for severe trauma. I personally at that time was not working on anything traumatic, but mostly learning. And so when I met these people, we became very close friends. Shout out to Jody and Abby. I ended up scheduling some time to work with them. I did sit for somebody else that was doing a 10-gram journey, and then I decided to do this experience myself as well. They live off-grid in Mexico, so they're in the middle of this beautiful jungle, and for my experience, there were 3 separate people that were watching over me and supporting me to make sure that I stayed safe, and they had protocols for an exit plan if things got really out of hand. So 10 grams is quite a bit, and I would never suggest to somebody to jump in and do 10 grams. There are some psychonauts in the world, definitely, that have done much more, and what I've gathered is at 10 grams, it's much more exploratory. And although at any experience you can learn from and heal from, I think that once you go into these higher levels of utilizing psychedelics, it can be much more exploratory and also very dangerous if you have a lot of trauma that comes up and people that don't know how to take care of you. So I felt very well taken care of with the setup that we had, the intentions that we had, and at the time it made a lot of sense, and it still does. The experience I had was really intense, but it was beautiful. In the beginning, as I was laying down after I ingested the mushrooms, I was waiting for it to come on, and because of the mixture that was made, the onset was within 15-20 minutes. So it was a really quick onset. It was a 4-hour experience, and then the come down was really easy. And for me, when I was sitting there waiting for the mushrooms to start to take place, I started to feel my dimensional self. So I could feel somewhat of an inner child. I could feel my inner self that was like, oh man, what's gonna happen here? I could feel all the different levels of myself joining in on this experience and sitting around waiting to find out what was going to happen. So that in and of itself was interesting and a little funny for me, just to be like, oh yeah, there's a part of me that's just sitting right over here, just waiting to see what happens. It's like trying to look at yourself. It's really interesting. In the experience, I went deep into my breath. I started breathing very deeply, and I started to experience really intense looping. So if you haven't had a big experience with mushrooms before, there is something called looping, or being in a loop. And basically it is just that, where your experience feels like it keeps repeating and repeating. And I kept coming back to that present moment, and then having a thought, and then going, and then it would come back to that present moment, and then having a thought, and it would come back to that present moment. So the looping became very extreme compared to some of the other experiences that I've had. Because I've had some experiences with psychedelics, and I've also been a lucid dreamer since I was really young, I think that this relates to psychedelics in a way of how to navigate and feeling empowered internally to be able to shift and move and conceptualize what you're going through from first person. So I would come back to the present moment. I was there with the people that were watching over me, and there was beautiful copal incense and different smells, and it was beautiful jungle outside. And I kept coming back to the same moment and being like, wow, if I'm stuck in this, is not a bad place to be stuck in. I could definitely be stuck in much worse loops. And then started to see how consciousness could exist in one place at a time. And time itself started to fracture in a way as a construct that we exist within. And so this experience was giving me these loops. It was like consciousness being stuck in a moment and not being able to progress to a different time. So I started to test it. I was thinking, okay, I know how to make the loop change, is I have to change it. So I would loop, and then I would make a move and move forward and trying to get back to go to a different space. And then that would start to loop and start to loop. And I thought it was hilarious. The entire time I was laughing really hard and just really, yeah, bring it on, here we go. The looping was, to me at the time, the cosmic joke. It was like, wow, we really think we know it, we know it all. And then you get into these expanded consciousness perspectives where you're, oh man, we're hilarious. This world is weird, and it's such a joke that we maybe stress out so hard when spiritually there's access to so much. So it brings you into a different perspective of reality. And in that experience, I also bring in my breath. And breathing a lot really helps you to move and shift. So I started really heavy breathing, and there was a lot that happened. I looked at my hands and I felt very androgynous. I felt like there was a masculine and feminine expression of myself, and really seeing myself for my spiritualness, and feeling as though I just landed in this body, in this planet, and just, wow, okay, here I am, here's my body, here's the construct of time. And felt like I was learning the technology of reality. And then as the event progressed, different things came up, and it was just a lot of the same thing of just reimagining the construct of reality and myself in it. And I just kept laughing. Wow, this is just a cosmic joke. What was really cool, and what I still take with me, is this experience where consciousness, it felt like the reality was displaying itself on 3D monitors. It looked like 6D monitors. Like everything we're seeing felt like they were all monitors, and consciousness was showing itself to us. And I would peek behind the monitors into this deep space and see consciousness looking back at me, and then getting behind another monitor showing me the channel that we were on, the world the reality that we're appearing and looking at. And then what was really cool was, because I was in such an amazing jungle space that was so beautiful, and because the psilocybin activates so many neural networks and opens your senses, I could see the bugs on a leaf from 30 feet away. I felt like I had extra vision to be able to zoom in and see the hairs on a cat that was walking by through the yard from far away, and I actively understood at that time that this type of eyesight, I don't see this clearly normally. But because the psilocybin's in the system, you feel like you have extra superpowers. So being able to look at things very detailed, very crisp, and see the details in the veins and the life force in like the plants. And then I saw the nature, and I saw it was me waking up. It was an experience of waking up into this technology, waking up into the world, and the world had shifted. And all of this nature, it was like the nature channel had turned on. It was as though the reality I was looking at originally was one channel. And then with the psilocybin in my system, I switched channels and I was in a different channel, and it was the nature channel. And it seemed that I had just woken up into this technology. And I call it a technology because it literally felt like just a flip of a switch, and then nature was there. A flip of a switch and the channel had changed and the suffering was gone. A flip of a switch and reality looked completely different. And I said, holy shit, yes, bring in that technology, bring it in. And it was as though we didn't need to put so much effort into physical shifting, but that to shift our world, it was a frequency change. It was a different channel, a different radio station that we could just tune into, and that it had existed. And not only did it exist, but that it was coming in. So I was like cheering and yes, we did it. We figured it out. Bring in the nature channel, bring in all of the beauty, bring in the synergy of life, bring in the harmony, bring in the safety, bring in all of these beautiful things that I dream of the world having an abundance of it. And I believe this is true, and so is everything else is also true at the same time, right? So this was so profound to me, and I was like, yes, bring that in. And it felt everybody around me was just waiting for me to wake up and realize that it already existed. And then simultaneously, I was waking up into this reality that nobody else could see. Because I knew I was working with mushrooms. I knew that they were in my system. I knew what I was doing. And I could look at the person that was sitting with me, and their role would shift. And I would see them as, oh man, I know they can't see what I see. And I'm so excited to bring in this technology and show this to them. And then on the other polar view, I would see them shift as, oh, they were waiting for me to wake up. They were waiting to show me the experience. And it was so intense. It really was. And some of the things that I learned, that was the experience as a whole. There's a lot more to it. Obviously, it was about a 4-hour journey. And I realized that this was a place of exploring larger concepts and also working out some of the bigger things within this space. What can happen, what I noticed also while sitting for somebody else and then just learning from my friends about this work that they do, is that the people around you, especially if more than one person is doing that experience, you can't help but bring in all the baggage. So whatever you have that you haven't worked through or anything can come into that space. It's very important to have very safe, clean space, and energetically as well. Because the people around you will start to play roles of the people that you need them to play. So for example, somebody might all of a sudden be playing the role of my dad, or playing the role of my brother, or playing the role of the neighbor, or playing the role of the master in my world, or playing the role as a demon. So the person that you're, and the people that you see, they start to represent archetypes that maybe need to be part of your experience. So if you can imagine being in a space on this amount of psychedelics with somebody that maybe you don't feel safe with, they might then turn into something, the icon of something you don't feel safe with. Or vice versa, somebody that you feel very safe with might turn into an archetype of something symbolizing safety or love or gratitude. And that person is a symbol of that. And so you wouldn't want to go into a place to being re-traumatized. So at this level, you really want to have worked through some of those deeper things before you go into exploration, because your subconscious just comes out. Any skeletons in the closet, they will appear in some way or another. So I feel really grateful that at the time I was ready to do this exploration, I saw how much I truly want to believe in the natural world coming into a better state of harmony, or that I truly feel that time is just a construct that we're living in. And so I explored what time meant, and me as a conscious being going into different spaces of time and experiencing it over and over again to understand it in a deeper way. So that is the majority of the story. There are definitely some wild stories out there, and I can only attest to my experience and what I've seen in my minimal amount of exposure really to doing these higher levels. And so whenever I work with somebody, we really start at 2 grams, 3 grams, obviously depending on the type of mushroom, because some are more potent than others. And like I said before, this is not medical advice or a guide telling you to do something. This is just more data for you and your knowledge base around what is possible. If you like this content, please subscribe and leave a comment. I am figuring out this world of YouTube